Okay, it's 4 o'clock, and welcome to Chapter 6 of our curriculum on trade, transportation, and technology that started this morning. We'll continue tomorrow again with some really interesting sessions on maritime, Alaska's supply chain, lifeline to Alaska from the Northwest Seaports, and then a really interesting session on advanced aviation, where we're going to talk about sustainable aviation fuel, which was a topic yesterday. And then we're going to get into kind of the crazy, brave world of electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft that will soon be moving people and goods with clean energy and no pilot. So it's going to be interesting. This is probably my favorite session because it's a program that I've been involved with for a long time. I don't remember the exact date. I was asking Johan if he could recall, but back, I think it was in 1995, passenger rail to Vancouver, BC was reestablished. I think they call it the Mount Baker International, and Jason will correct me if I'm wrong on that, but it was a great and a very slow train ride with a lot of dignitaries, and BNSF was really gracious to take us up to Vancouver. I think it was Ralph Monroe and Congressman Al Swift, who later became the author of Swift Rail from the Bellingham area. Wonderful guy that was really the beginning of high-speed rail discussions in Congress. And it was a slow train ride. We didn't have the track improvements that washed out at Amtrak and BNSF had made. But I'll never forget, everybody was in a great mood. And we, if you've been on that route, the Chuckanut goes through. It's just spectacular. And we come around a corner, and there's this famous nude beach in Whatcom County. And everybody's having cocktails and canapes, and look over, and there's a lot of young naked people waving at the train. And it was a bit of levity on that trip, but the point was that it reestablished passenger rail connections between Seattle and Vancouver. And one of the things we're going to talk about today is with FIFA World Cup, what are the opportunities both in short term and long term? And this is such not only is it a beautiful route, but it's a route that's got that WashDOT is in particular, in BNSF, the partnership with FRA and the other partners, Sound Transit, have been just really, we think it's the best state-operated rail system, passenger rail system in the country. It really is remarkable. But anyway, I'm going to turn it over to David Hoff, our good friend from LEDCOR. David is our spark plug in Canada on all things rail. Formerly with Via Rail on their board. He works very closely with the Cascadia Innovation Corridor, headed by former Governor Christine Gregoire. Microsoft's a big supporter of that. We're going to hear about that. What's nice about David is that he understands the need to invest in the rail corridor today. Continue these incremental investments, get more champions in the lower mainland in Canada for investments in rail, but he also sees the future with high-speed rail. So I'm going to have him describe the session, and then we'll go right into presentations. David?
Thank you, Bruce, for your kind remarks. And as Bruce sort of outlined with some of that historic story, he's very passionate about passenger rail. He can tell you about probably every route in the Pacific Northwest and what the potential is for tourism or cargo or development. So he brings a lot of expertise behind the scenes. As I mentioned, Cascadia Innovation Corridor, that's a joint venture between BC Business Council and Challenge Seattle. Amy here is from Challenge Seattle. We don't have any here from BC Business Council, but I'm on the board of directors, and I look forward to moderating this session. So we're going to be looking at the situation here in Cascadia. There's a theory about having a mega region here, which includes Vancouver going down to Portland, and it may have a growth between 3 to 4 million people by 2050. There's going to need some innovative improvements to our existing systems, including passenger rail and freight, and planning for future needs. High-speed rail is a part of that, but there are also things that need to be done in the here and now. So our session is going to be in two parts. The first session will talk about some of the existing services and some of the aspirational services for Cascades, the existing service and Cascade High-Speed Rail, and also with the BNSF for some of their work they're doing to bring AI in, which will be interesting to hear about AI in industrial context. Then we'll have a Q&A, and then the second session, we'll have another set of panelists who are also in the operational roles. And then we'll talk a little bit about how business community and those projects also move ahead with a second set of Q&A as well. So, but first of all, before I start, I would like to recognize our sponsor for this session is BNS Railway. So thank you very much for that. And fortunately, we have somebody from BNSF to thank with that when he speaks. So Johan Hellman is Executive Director at BNSF Railway, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about how AI is being incorporated into their operations right now and some of the things they hope to do with it. So over to you, Johan.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks everybody for being here. I always love these sessions that are about tomorrow and the future. And it reminds me of like when I was a kid and people would talk about the year 2000 when, you know, your dog will talk to you and everybody will have flying cars and stuff like that. It conjures these 1964 World's Fair kinds of images. And I just imagine dogs in spacesuits delivering packages. But the reality is more, I think, along the lines of what Yogi Berra said, which is it's tough to make predictions, especially about the future. Kind of well known for him. He's also said the future ain't what it used to be, which I think is just brilliant. It's almost poetry. So you can say that you went to the program and there were some Yogi Berra quotes, so it was officially an actual meeting. You can't have one without that. For me, I totally believe that if you're a modern company, you're by definition a technology company. The question is just how you use technology. And in the case of the railroad, we're using technology to move trains more safely and efficiently and to maximize our network to accommodate all the cargo we're tasked with moving. So let's talk a little bit about what the railroad does, what the railroad looks like, and then I'll talk a little bit more specifically about the technology that we use. So this is what our network looks like. We're in 28 states. We've got 32,500 route miles, and we operate also in 3 Canadian provinces. So truly an international network. We have 13,000 bridges, 89 tunnels. We serve 40 plus ports, 25 intermodal facilities. The main 3 legs of our network go north-south from Canada down to the Gulf, and then along the southern transcon out to Los Angeles from Chicago, and then from Chicago out to Seattle along the Great Northern Corridor. It's really an amazing piece of efficiency, and if you look historically at maps of the United States, it really locks together some of the major trade routes that have been going for hundreds of years in a very efficient way. Here in Washington State, things start to get really interesting when we get out to the coast, because once we cross over the Idaho-Washington border, this is really, in my mind, where the train, the truck, and the ship all meet. And so everything becomes compressed as we come into Washington State. If you think about it, a train leaves Chicago, it goes through the Dakotas, it goes across the Northern Plains, it goes through Montana and through Idaho. It's pretty much steady state through that. And then once we get out here, we have to start making choices. We have to start adjusting to schedules of manufacturing plants. We have to start adjusting to shipping schedules. We have to start adjusting to weather. And of course, we've got mountains and streams and rivers and volcanoes and the Puget Sound and all of these things that make this a very complex place to move trains. And helping us move trains are these different kinds of technology that we use. So one is called positive train control, which I think a lot of people understand. It was something that was very innovative 10, 15 years ago when we first started rolling it out. What positive train control does is it allows us to monitor a train's movement. And if we notice that a train is operating in a way that it shouldn't be, let's say that it moves through a switch or it's coming too quickly into an intersection, anything that train's doing that doesn't seem right, we're able to take control of it remotely and stop that train before it causes an accident. So it's been a tremendous revolution, really, in technology and also in safety on the railroads. Since it was rolled out about 10 years ago, we've done more than 4 million revenue service trips using positive train control. BNSF was one of the first companies to start making the investment. Talk about these wayside detectors, and these are pretty interesting. We move equipment all over the network, and we have 4,000 of these detectors that are collecting data on every locomotive and rail car. It's doing it 24/7 across the system. And we're taking these big data analytics, we're running algorithms that sort out 35 million individual pieces of data every day and those track readings, and it helps us to identify potential issues, make maintenance more accurate and efficient. Think about that, 35 million data readings every day. So we know really what's happening with every train that's moving across. We're monitoring that. And the data also allows us to get better information for updating our network. If we're seeing that there's certain places where we're starting to run into issues, if we're seeing that where trains are faster in areas or slower than areas, we use that data to also help us make decisions on where we invest in our capital program. And BNSF invests about $3.5 billion to say $6 billion per year on capital. Right here in Washington State, that's about $150 million to $250 million every year. So major investments in the network, and a lot of that's driven by the information that we're getting from wayside detectors and other monitors. We also have these autonomous unmanned track geometry cars that are going around. They're measuring the track, they're measuring the flange, they're checking every piece that they can about how that track is operating. And when they find something that needs updating, that also informs our capital improvement system too. So that's pretty remarkable. It's out there all the time. And then, you know, like I said, we're crunching all of that data down. And what it's doing is it's providing information, but it's still people who are making the decisions. And I think that's really important to understand, because I think there's this idea that, you know, AI is sort of this big brain that's making all the decisions, that's everything is sort of deferred to that. I can tell you my experience working for BNSF, and I travel through the territory and across the network quite a bit, is this is something that I see a lot, is people looking at 6 screens of track charts and coordinating with other people at the Network Operations Center and other people in the region to say, okay, we've got a train that's coming in, it needs to be at this ship by 9 o'clock. What do we need to do to adjust that traffic to make it work? And so what AI does is it makes suggestions. It says, you know, this is what the data is telling us. This is where we think trains are going to be able to meet and pass, where they're going to be able to move past each other efficiently and safely. But ultimately, those decisions are made by a group of people, actually, not one person, but several checks across the way to make sure that that's happening. These are some of the different trackside sensors that we use. So we have acoustic bearing detectors that are microphone-based. They evaluate sounds that are generated by specific bearing component defects. So if they hear something that's not quite right, they identify that. They say this train isn't moving right. There's a flange that's out of adjustment on the 3rd car on such and such a train. They can monitor that. They can tell if it's getting worse, and then quickly get that car off to the side and move it out. It's really important to understand that with all of these detectors, they're hearing things that can't be detected by the human ear. They're seeing things that can't be observed by the human eye. We're also doing inspections of track, you know, human inspections, and we're looking at every train as it's coming through the rail yard. But a lot of this information allows us to get details about trains that just you couldn't get any other way. You can't see the inside of a truck and tell if the metal is starting to kind of break away in parts that could be problematic. With these bearing detectors, we're able to do that. So another one is a hot box detector. This one evaluates the temperature of the bearings, and it helps us to identify brake issues, if there's anything that's being burned off. Anytime that wheel is overheating in a way that could be really problematic and potentially catastrophic, it helps us to see that. And then also wheel tread detectors. These are camera-based systems that perform a visual inspection of the entire wheel plate and tread surface, identifying any cracks, any breaks, any missing pieces. So, you know, really a huge amount of detail that we're able to get. And again, we have eyes on every train that's going across the network, so we get as much information as we possibly can. And then all of that leads down to our Network Operations Center in Fort Worth, Texas. So this is a room that's the size of a football field. At any given time, there's 100 people working on the floor. It's really comparable to like NORAD or NASA Mission Control. The screen on the wall is 150 feet long of continuous screen. I mean, I think it's about 16 feet tall. And what it does is it's giving everyone on the floor information in real time so that they can make decisions. In addition to what they're getting on their screens, they're able to look at that and make decisions in real time. And then each of these little cubicles are different divisions of the railroad. So there's a passenger rail cubicle, there's an agricultural desk, there's an intermodal desk. And so all of these different pieces are working in real time to ensure that they're getting the best information and then able to make the best decisions based on that. So it's a pretty remarkable place to be. Like I said, there's about 500 people who work in the NOC, about 150 people on the floor at any given time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year they're there working. So that's the substance of what I've got. I guess that the last thing I would say is that go back to what I said at the beginning, which is that if you are a company, you're a technology company, whatever it is. It just happens to be, in our case, we're in the technology of running trains safely and efficiently. We invest in that aggressively, and it helps us make much more informed decisions going forward. But ultimately, it's about just that piece. It's about that human piece, people making informed decisions so that we can run more safely and efficiently. But I thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Johan. And one thing, a stat I didn't mention, I hope I got it right, but I think you have as many employees as you do miles of track. I think there's about a one-to-one relation, about 34,000 employees, 34,000 miles of track. So it's a lot of employees across that. That's right. Yeah, they have a little sign there as well, too. And I also should mention, congratulate BNSF on their investment in PTC. It's actually very expensive, so expensive that we still have not rolled it out in Canada in some places because of very long, thin parts of the network. Mr. Miller, formerly from CN, let me call him out. He knows some of the challenges of that here. So we're trying to catch up with that, and that's because of the cost. So certainly you guys are showing some leadership there. And then also just a reminder, if you have any questions you want to have for Johan or the other speakers, to use the WHAPA app, and you can add your questions there, and we'll get to them later on. Now I'd like to bring up two speakers. The first is from two from WashDOT. The first is Jason Biggs, who's been with the WashDOT for quite a while, and he is the Director of Rail, Freight, and Ports, and also that means he involves with the Amtrak Cascades. So he's going to give us some updates on some equipment and technology upgrades that are coming, I believe. Jason.
Excellent. Well, thank you, David. Appreciate that. So I'm going to build upon what Johan was talking about, technology initiatives, but I'm going to take it to the passenger rail perspective. Talk about we're evolving, how we're innovating. So Bruce, speaking of initiatives, I think there's maybe a missed marketing opportunity at North End. I'll pass that on to our marketing team. Or maybe not. All right, again, my name's Jason Biggs. I'm with the Director for the Rail, Freight, and Ports Division, Washington State Department of Transportation. So in talking about innovation, first we have to understand what the Amtrak Cascades corridor is. This is a map of the corridor. There are 18 communities that we serve along the corridor. It's about 461 miles in length. That's about 740 kilometers in length. It serves 2 states, 2 countries, and 1 province. It is one of only 3 international train services, so that's a key point. When you think about our service segments, our southern terminus is Eugene, the northern terminus is Vancouver, British Columbia, but we have 3 main segments. So we have the north segment, Seattle to Vancouver, our mid segment, Seattle to Portland, and that is our highest ridership segment, and then Portland to Eugene. Daily round trips, 2 to the north between Seattle to Vancouver, 6 between Portland and Seattle, and 2 to the south end. There's a couple fundamental things when I use the term intercity passenger rail. That is a U.S. federal designation. That means it's a publicly funded service that operates on host railroad tracks. So the states of Washington, the states of Oregon, through our transportation departments, we fund the Amtrak Cascades, the operation components. There are no federal subsidies that come in for operations, and that's because of that length. Think of it as mid-length service, so less than 750 miles in length. We did have record ridership last year, almost 1 million people. We were just shy, so we need a few more folks to ride. We'll meet that 1 million mark. We're on track for about the same in 2025. We're not going to likely exceed 1 million riders, and that is because our capacity of the demand exceeds the capacity of our trains, and I'll talk about that on our next topic. So the busiest stations in terms of order, on and off, Seattle's number 1, Portland's number 2, and Vancouver, British Columbia is number 3. And if there's a key takeaway that informs the decisions around Washington and Oregon as we move forward, again, keep in mind it's a public transportation service. So innovation around new technology, brand new train sets. So we are fortunate through the Investment in Infrastructure Jobs Act to be receiving funding for 8 new train sets, 2 new locomotives, and 1 spare cab car. These are manufactured here in the United States, right outside in Elk Grove, California, outside the suburbs of Sacramento. They're going to be the first to be delivered. Breaking news here today that the very first train set is on its way to Pueblo, Colorado, where we'll do some testing. I know we have an Amtrak board member. Perhaps you'll take some pictures if you get on that first trip there. This is a springboard. This is a springboard for the service in terms of sustainability and rider experience. So when you take a car, a train, a taxi, a boat, an aircraft, whatever mode that you're traveling on, the piece of equipment helps define your experience. It's not the definitive, it's not 100%, but it's close. right? It's part of your experience. We're going to have one of the top experiences when we introduce these new train sets. Modern Wi-Fi, wider seats, better accessibility, safety, USB-C ports. I'm pretty excited about that one. So we have a little bit of a friendly rivalry with our folks to the north. This is a Via Rail. They were the last to introduce new equipment. I was at an Amtrak board meeting. I got to co-present with them. But one of the questions I asked them was, what was your feedback when you introduced new equipment? What was the experience? And the words were simple. Everything is just better. So we're looking forward to that everything just better experience, and that's coming here in spring of 2026. So business innovations. This is a lot of busy, there's a lot of words on here, graphic, but what we're doing here is managing revenues. So I want you to think about, back to that public transportation service. There's a cost to operate the service. We receive revenues, and that delta between the two, right, that's the operating subsidy. That's the taxpayer subsidy. So prior to the pandemic, which is that first set, you can see obviously where the pandemic hit, but we had a pretty steady revenue, but we didn't really have very dynamic ways that we were marketing this, receiving the revenues. It was based on distance traveled. Maybe we did a discount if you bought tickets 2 weeks in advance. Since 2022, I will give credit to Amtrak. They brought on new people, a lot from the airline industry, and what they brought and helped us with is dynamic pricing based on load factor and real-time market conditions. This is what rideshare services do. This is what the airlines do. And this is what we are now doing. So in 2022, our revenues were down, but we were recovering from the pandemic. 2024, we had our highest revenue year. We do have a target. Our target is 60%. In 2024, we were at 52%, also because our costs went up. We're tracking and trending now for 2025 at about 63%. So we want to keep that momentum. We want to keep that innovation. All right, powering smarter travel. Everybody's got an app. Washington has an app also. What the app does for Amtrak Cascades is two things. One is real-time information. Real-time information on our routes, all of our trains. So if you are scheduling your travel or you're picking somebody up, you know in real time where the trains are at. Also, purchasing your ticket. Online is the #1 way that anybody purchases a ticket. So this provides the convenience for both. Also, if you are perhaps multiple legs of your travel on the Amtrak Cascades or you're getting the Amtrak Cascades, you can check traffic, you can check our ferry or mountain passes, other ways to make sure that you get to your destination on time. Now, a lot of folks don't like new apps. That's okay. If you don't want to download the Washington app, Google Maps integrates Amtrak Cascades and the Amtrak long distance services also, as long as you click the transit option. So this is about using data smarter. So this is a graphic laid on its side, the Seattle to Vancouver, British Columbia leg. What we're doing is on-time performance. We're trying to improve on-time performance. So on-time performance is measured at our major stations as you arrive within or less than 10 minutes of your scheduled arrival time. So if you departed Seattle and got to Vancouver, British Columbia within 7 minutes late, your train's still on time. If you're 11 minutes late, your train's not on time. But we know that there's on-time performance challenges. We get a lot of data. We have an on-time performance task force. Where do we focus our limited resources and our limited budgets that we have to make the most impact? So we had looked at it at the larger corridor segments. Now we're taking it down to city pair segments. You can see that Edmonds and Everett, 92% on time. It starts to degrade Stanwood, but really, in this case, in this scenario here, between Bellingham and Vancouver, British Columbia, this is where we see the majority of our on-time performance. So this is where we're going to focus our efforts to improve. So this is under, I would say, social innovation. We are the only intercity passenger rail service in the nation that has a zero youth fare program. That means any rider that's 18 years of age or less can ride on the Amtrak Cascades at zero fare. This is really, we have legislative members in here. This is really part of their foresight that they required and asked us to implement in 2022 this zero fare youth program, but not only on the Amtrak Cascades, but also on our ferry systems, on our transit systems. And this is really a climate forward investment in the next generation so they're comfortable riding the trains so they can make those decisions to leave their single occupant vehicles behind and choose greener transportation. This didn't come without its technological challenges. I guess if there's any airline buffs that are out there, the Amtrak ticketing system, this was based on a revolutionary reservation system developed in the late 70s between American Airlines and IBM called Sabre. So part of the technological challenge was taking that legacy code that Amtrak used and bringing it up to contemporary standards. So not only was it for the 18 years in age and younger, but also geographic boundaries. And the reason it's geographic boundaries is the revenues that cover the Zero Youth Fare program are provided from the Washington State Legislature through proceeds received from our Cap and Trade program through our Climate Commitment Act. So again, this is a very climate-forward investment and innovation in our next generation. So those are just a few of what we're doing the here and now, but we need to look to the future. At WashDOT, we have Washington State Department of Transportation 2 planning documents. The first is the 2025 State Rail Plan. This is the strategic blueprint for all rail in the state of Washington. It also looks at connections to Idaho, to Oregon, to British Columbia. It's not just passenger rail, it's freight rail, it's passenger rail, it's commuter rail. It also acknowledges future services, such as our good friends with the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority. They're restoring the North Coast Hiawatha and high-speed rail. This effort's currently underway. This will be complete in late or early 2026. We'll be publishing the State Rail Plan. In conjunction with that is the Amtrak Cascades Service Development Plan. This is the detailed look over the next 20 years of what's needed for the Amtrak Cascades. And at the end of this, there'll be a list of projects for implementation. We have started this work under preliminary service development plan. We've been fortunate to receive IIJA or investment jobs monies to move this forward. Mr. Rob Urban will talk a little bit on a graphic about some more detail about how that process works. But really, we have bold goals. We know in 2024, as part of the analysis of this, so our current round trip Seattle-Portland, 6. Forecast, 16. 2 round trips Seattle to existing to Vancouver, British Columbia. 6 is what is predicted out there. So we know that there's a demand for it, but we also know that the infrastructure has capacity constraints between the growth in freight, critical freight, growth in commuter rail, growth in intercity passenger rail, growth in our long distance services. That lends to the question, what does the future hold? High-speed rail. Earlier today, in this very room, there was a supply chain conversation, and there was a comment about how do you keep supply chain moving? How do you keep goods moving? And the person said, well, there's a secret sauce, and it's moving things multiple ways. And that's really what we need to do with people out here in the Pacific Northwest. So inevitably, this graphic shows a band of where high-speed rail is going to go. The green is the Cascade service, the I-5. Again, because of the growth, you talked about the 3 to 5 and 30, the population that's out here. We need another system. I get the question, will high-speed rail, will that replace the Amtrak Cascades? And the answer is no. They will be complementary services. They'll be a part of an integrated rail network that you see over on the East Coast, that you see in other countries. And for me, Amtrak Cascades is my portfolio, but I'm very excited to be working with Mr. Rob Berman and the high-speed team to make that a reality. With that, thank you.
Thanks, Jason. And before we go to Rob on the sort of longer future, Jason gave us an update on what's going on today and the months and weeks ahead. Just for some people to know in the audience, Alberta government, they have just finished a study on passenger rail, which is relatively new. It had a very short deadline. It was about a $9 million study. They looked at all the various types of markets. They haven't looked at solutions yet. There's been some talk about high-speed rail between Edmonton and Calgary. That's a bit premature, but it certainly shows that the renaissance of passenger rail, or there's been renewed interest in it as well too. Then also, just for some of our Canadian representatives here, certainly you've seen a little bit from Jason about the federated model of Amtrak. You have a sort of a national network, but you have the states very much involved. We also have Elaine Clegg, who's Amtrak new board director from Idaho as well. Thank you for coming. In Canada, things run a little bit different. As I mentioned, we've got our freight systems before. We have Via Rail, which is a totally 100% federal Crown corporation, good for the taxpayers of British Columbia and Alberta. It's paid for someplace else, but the head office is in Montreal, which has its own challenges with the distance. And then plus there's also Rocky Mountaineer Rail, which is a privately run tourism train in Canada, which also has now moved into the U.S. So different models available there. So now I'd like to invite Rob Berman to come up and speak. Rob is a program administrator with WashDOT as well, and he's looking far into the future on Cascadia high-speed rail, but also wisely their department is integrating HSR with the I-5 development as well and interstate as well. So Rob, look forward to your comments. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Good afternoon, everyone. So just for clarity, I am Rob Berman, and I am the acting program administrator for the Cascadia High-Speed Rail and I-5 program. That's under the Washington State Transportation, as everyone so far has said, and I'm here today to share a brief update on Cascadia High-Speed Rail and our current phase of work and moving toward a service development plan. So this presentation should level set the context for the upcoming panelists who will speak more about the benefits or potential benefits and opportunities that high-speed rail may bring to the Cascadia megaregion. So David mentioned a few of these things, but I always like to start with why are we having this conversation in the first place? And really what we're seeing is population growth. The Cascadia region can generally from Portland, Oregon, or the metropolitan area of Portland, Oregon, through Western Washington to the metropolitan area of Vancouver, British Columbia, continues to grow, and it grows at a pace that really requires us to act now for the future. Research from the Cascadia Innovation Corridor, as David mentioned, projects that our population will grow 3 to 4 million more people by 2050. That's around a 30% increase. And so as we prepare for this growth, we have the opportunity and probably the responsibility to plan a transportation system that provides new travel options for greater access and greater connectivity. The transportation focus that we're working on is part of a broader conversation about the region's future. Our work must be done in close coordination with other aspects of regional planning, such as land use and economic viability. So we continue to make investments in our transportation system to reliably move both people and goods around the region for generations to come. We're really looking at a very far future for this area. And it's critical to maintaining our region's economic competitiveness, not just in the US, but this mega region's competitiveness around the world. And at the same time, we are, and we still expect to see greater strain on the system, not just from greater use, but increased weather events and natural disasters. So we need to plan a system that's more resilient. Consistent with the direction from the Washington State Legislature, WSDOT established the Cascadia High-Speed Rail and I-5 program in response to those future needs. Taking care of our existing infrastructure while we plan for the bigger economic future is an important approach, and I think it's a really good use of our transportation, our precious transportation dollars. So looking at both the I-5 facility and the future of high-speed rail together offers also some efficiencies in how we collect and analyze data, how we engage with communities, agencies, tribal governments, First Nations, business, and ultimately how we make decisions for investment for the future. As part of the legislature's charge, this program is also closely coordinating with the other modes in the corridor, including air mobility and Amtrak Cascades, as Jason spoke to. One note, as I say corridor, what I mean in this presentation is generally that blue swath that Jason mentioned as well. Corridor, we don't know exactly, but it's somewhere in there from our first guess. The program that we're working with is really two significant components. The I-5 master plan, or an actionable master plan, will create and prioritize and direct investment through a more focused system-wide approach for that existing facility. And then Cascadia High-Speed Rail, just to be clear, we are talking about a brand new service in a brand new corridor on tracks specifically designed for high-speed rail. And you can see the economic benefits that we're talking about here, previously estimated by the Cascadia Innovation Corridor at $355 billion US and more than 200,000 jobs between the planning, design, construction, and operation of a system like this. I also want to put this in context. Let's consider where Cascadia High-Speed Rail and I-5, for that matter, sit within the transportation options. As we plan investments for a resilient transportation system, we need to look at all the way people and goods move around for local, for regional, and for mega region trips. Our focus in this program is certainly on the mega region side. And you'll see that all those things on the right, all these modes are needed in addition to when we think about the future of high-speed rail to accommodate not only our existing communities, but also the potential opportunities of the future. You'll see Amtrak Cascades and high-speed rail over there in the mega region trips. Super clear. Our baseline assumption is that high-speed rail, again, wouldn't eliminate Amtrak Cascades, but instead would consider potential connections to and from the Cascades and those other modes so that high-speed rail is accessible within a more comprehensive system. All right, so let me talk about where we've been real briefly. First of all, I want to thank the partnership between Oregon, Washington, British Columbia, and the private sector. The organizations represented here on the screen are the backbone of the work that has been going on for some years now. And they continue to meet and then meet regularly to provide guidance and review material for our current phase of work. A little bit deeper dive on how we got here. The high-speed rail, Cascadia high-speed rail was socialized originally as a concept at the Cascadia Innovation Corridor Conference in 2016. And then since 2016, Washington, Oregon, British Columbia, and the private sector have all contributed funds for initial studies that eventually led to 2 federal grant applications in 2023. And WashDOT received an award through the Federal Railroad Administration, or FRA, Corridor Identification and Development Program, or CID, as I speak forward. And that happened at the end of 2023. And then in December of 2024, after working with the FRA through Step 1, WashDOT was awarded additional federal funds and state match money from our legislature to enter Step 2 of the CID program, which is our current phase and will culminate in a service development plan. Before I get to the service development plan, just a little bit more following up on something Jason said on the funding. So this is the funding pipeline for FRA's passenger rail services. One of the important things to note is that it's a funding pipeline. Once we're in, we don't need to keep reapplying or recompeting for funds as long as, super important, as long as we meet the grant requirements to advance to the next steps. We're currently in project planning, which is the orange arrow there on the screen. And we will need not only approvals, but also additional funding before we would move into any sort of programmatic or higher level environmental analysis and documentation in this phase. The next phase is project development, which is yellow, and that's where project level, like NEPA, if you're familiar, National Environmental Policy Act, would really take place, as well as more detailed design. And then I also want to acknowledge that at the bottom of the screen there's another federal funding pipeline called the Federal State Partnership Program. It also offers funding for the opportunities in project development as we move into the later phases, such as final design, construction, and those sorts of things. And as Jason, I'm not sure he mentioned or not, but not to be even more confusing, but WashDOT does also have a CID, is in the CID program for the Amtrak Cascades project. So lots of coordination back and forth there. Okay, service development plan. What are we doing? What's the technical work that we need to complete in Step 2 here? So the service development plan is defined by FRA and designed as a fairly prescriptive series of tasks to clarify potential and viability, or otherwise the project readiness for this program to move forward to next steps. On the screens is generally our 4-year work plan, and we need to work through a phase gate process with the FRA. So the agency needs to accept some of our key deliverables before we're able to move on or unlock funding to keep going to the next work streams in this process. And then really the big work starts in 2026. That's where we're going to be heavily in documenting the existing conditions of the corridor and then move into an analysis of potential routes and potential service options. Routes is pretty self-explanatory. Service options at a high level for this are operating requirements like speed and travel times. And just a note, we consider environmental planning, governance, financial analysis. Those are all iterative processes as we go along the way here in the service development plan. We must not only build the infrastructure for the future, but also the governance and the governance capacity that it's going to take to deliver and operate a system like this. Some things on for the rest of this year. Here's what we're working on. 3 key tasks in 2025. The coordination plans to develop, to identify how we'll engage and coordinate externally to our project team with communities, with tribes, with First Nations, agencies, railroad operators, private sector, anyone interested in the project, including riders. The draft, preliminary draft, purpose and need statement, which is not a NEPA or an environmental policy statement, but it provides initial parameters for us for as we move forward in the analysis of routes and service options, and how this high-speed rail might contribute to a multi-state regional network. It's important for FRA to see those things. And then the market analysis, that's going to build off a lot of the previous studies. There was a business case done, an economic impacts report. Being the most intensive work that we have this year, the market analysis is pretty foundational for proving out if we have something here. It will inform our technical work and answer or ask some key questions like who is traveling, where are they going? Why are they going there? How might that change if high-speed rail was in this system for our mega region? We'll look at planned and projected changes in land use, economic conditions, demographics. This includes understanding how those factors might change in response to high-speed rail, such as maybe employers making different types of investments or transit agencies modifying the services that they provide if high-speed rail is in the mix for us. And what kind of transportation gaps, those gaps that might be limiting opportunities today, but also impediments to future opportunities for our mega region. So building off of what we learn in the market analysis, we'll move into the next steps of doing a more detailed ridership in 2026 and beyond. I also want to acknowledge we're not naive. We're not working in a box. We're learning lessons where we can from other high-speed rail projects around the country and internationally. And we're trying to figure out how some of those lessons learned, positive and negative, might apply to the unique situation that we are in our unique geography. We have reviewed and interviewed staff from other high-speed rail projects in the North America. And some of I'm just going to highlight a few things that are coming to light already that we know we have to work on. Land acquisition requires creative, strategic thinking to leverage existing rights-of-way, like interstates, utility corridors, or those other large landowner approaches, and we need to start thinking about that early. Costs, of course, should be carefully managed. And this includes avoiding costly legal delays that have affected some of the projects in California, for example. Delays that have stemmed from things like inconsistent decision-making and cost promises that were made way too early before the team was really ready to put those out in the public. Permitting. Permitting is a big one. Permitting's a lengthy process anyway. But imagine 345 miles of overlapping jurisdictions to permit something like this. So consideration should be given to opportunities to expedite through a thoughtful approach centered on early coordination with local agencies. And perhaps we need to start thinking about how we consolidate the authorities for permitting for something this large. A sturdy coalition is needed to maintain momentum. We're talking about a multi-generational project that just to get to implementation. So we need a coalition, especially in those hard times. And of course, high-speed rail needs a sound funding strategy based on durable sources that's flexible to weather the changing private, public, or state or federal budgetary environments. So this is an ongoing learning process for us. We're not done. And these are just some of the things that are coming out so far that we know we're going to have to strategically manage and have answers to as we move forward. So I'll just close by saying this is a pretty incredible opportunity that high-speed rail might provide to the Cascadia mega region. High-speed rail could enhance our position to compete with other regions, not just domestically, but globally, supporting a robust innovation and labor economy in the process. It could advance more resilient mega region transportation, providing greater travel options to move more people and goods as we continue to grow. It could serve as a catalyst for more strategically connected mega region, enabling us to think about expanding the benefits of this collaboration across borders with our neighbors beyond just transportation, but all those other things that being connected offers us. And it could unlock opportunities for land use innovation, supporting higher quality of life through access to job centers, housing opportunities, and different types of livable communities. So this opportunity is why public and private sector leaders in Washington, Oregon, British Columbia, and the private sector have remained committed to advancing this work to date. With that, I thank you, and I think we're going to turn it back to you for Q&A.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob, Jason, and Johan for excellent presentations. So this will be our first Q&A session. We have a small enough room, we probably could have people ask questions from their table, and we could probably hear it, or we also have a microphone. We also have the app. But maybe I'll ask one question before we have a question in front of us. Maybe I'll just ask the first question. One thing to know, maybe all three of you can talk about intermodality. In some ways, Bruce and Tom has created this session with that way because we have some commuter rail people following later. Can you talk a little bit more about how the relationships you have in intermodality, both on the freight side and on the passenger side a little bit, if you want to speak a little more on that?
Sure. So this is a common question that comes up. So Amtrak Cascades, we operate on private railroads. I think the common misconception is that there's a competition out there, that freight or passenger, one is going to impact the other. The reality is to implement passenger service on a host railroad, on a freight railroad, that capacity has to be created. So there's an underlying base condition for freight, there's a growth factor for freight, and then there's the passenger rail, commuter rails, the other services on top of that. So it is really incumbent on whomever is the sponsor of the passenger component to then create that capacity for future passenger service. To make sure they work in tandem.
Yeah, and there's an additional, is this on? Can you hear me? Okay. There's an additional piece that sort of occurred to me as I was thinking about this session, which is that there's an inherent difference in philosophy between the way that freight moves and the way that passengers move. And here's what it is. On the freight side, we're moving as part of a just-in-time supply chain, right? So a manufacturer in Washington State might want 17 widgets this week. They might want 15 next week. And the week after that, they might want 3 on Monday and 5 on Wednesday or something like that. And so our network is always adapting to that, which is part of the reason why rail is so resilient. But on the passenger side, you have this situation where they don't care how many people are necessarily on any one train, but it has to be at the platform at 8 a.m. It has to be there. And so, in addition to everything else that we talked about with weather and, geography and different trains coming through and ships and trains and all of these things meeting, there's this additional pressure of having to meet those schedules and make them mesh every single day on a network that is incredibly dynamic and changes day by day. So I think that's part of it, but that's why we continue to have conversations. That's why we continue to look towards the future. That's why we continue to build partnerships and create these opportunities to think about, okay, how have we been doing it so far and how can we do it better?
Maybe I have a variation for Rob. So in Canada, they're looking at high-speed rail. There's a project that's now moving ahead, sort of Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, Quebec City. There's been a competition. The company that's actually doing the work on it right now is Atkins Realis, which is an engineering company, SNCF, which is the French rail line, and interestingly, one of the partners is Air Canada, and we've also have YVR very interested from the Canadian standpoint. So, Rob, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about airports, and we talked about commuter rail connecting with rail, but maybe the airports and how they figure in the future plans. So.
I can't. Am I on? Okay. Yeah, thank you. We were early, but we have already had great conversations with YVR. We actually have conversations with Port of Seattle, Seattle Tacoma International, coming up here in the next couple weeks. The airports are showing interest as well as we talk about an integrated network. If we can help kind of back to the freight passenger analogy, we also have an airspace land capacity too that we're going to try and help balance for the future, and that's part of the benefit of where I sit is I get to be a futurist and think about all those types of things where we can connect sound transit and we can connect air and we can connect those local trips as well in a more accessible way. So I'll just say we're pretty early, David, but I'm pretty positive about it.
Thank you. Question in front here.
Yeah, I'm curious, you know, high-speed rail all over the world, and it seems that one of the issues is always finding that right-of-way, you know, eminent domain, you know, California is still dealing with it, you know, Amtrak on the Northeast Corridor, you know, you've got to build a new right-of-way for high-speed rail. The current right-of-way won't work. Is there, I mean, what's sort of the status of where you want to build this thing?
Pretty early. Don't know. What I keep saying is if it's not 100% brand new greenfield, I would say it's going to be pretty doggone close. I mean, the types of constraints that we're seeing on the existing rail that we have, as well as on I-5 for that matter, make it really difficult to weave something that's moving at high speed on a brand new track. So I keep using that blue swath. I don't know exactly where that's going to be, but certainly that the conversation about land acquisition and permitting is really forefront for us even early in planning.
Because you got mountains on one side, water on
Correct.
the other.
Yeah. And plenty of rivers to cross, and plenty of lands that multiple tribes feel responsibility for as well. So it's a long-term venture for us.
One other answer related to that, just on Alberta, they created a utility corridor many years ago between Edmonton and Calgary. Everybody thought it was a great idea, utility, possible passenger rail. But when they created it, it's pretty far out from all the cities, especially Red Deer. And now Red Deer is saying, why is that utility corridor so far away from our city if they're actually going to use it? So the planning process is pretty tricky. Question?
Yeah, in terms of the construction, would this be a system that you would build all at once, or would you build it in segments as you move, you know, north or south in the corridor?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's really long, you know, and so for us, I can't presuppose where we would build first, but I could see us figuring out how to get segments built. We're also talking about fairly limited stops, and so, you know, we could be 100 plus miles between stops. So really to make something functional, it's a long corridor regardless of how we segment the construction and the permitting of it. But yes, and I think the market analysis and then the subsequent ridership analysis is going to help us identify whether do we have more viability, Seattle to Vancouver, Vancouver to Portland. Got to have the whole thing. Not quite sure yet, but thanks for the question.
I think we're out of time for questions for this section. We've got another panel wants to come up, and so I believe some of our presenters will be around here through the rest of the session, may be able to see the map. So maybe a round of applause for our three presenters. Thank you, and once again, thank you to BNSF for being our sponsor. The next panel we have are individuals who are involved with operating commuter rail services and or supporting them, and we'll bring them forward. Our first is Ashton Simpson. We'll have him speak firstly to begin some introductory remarks. He's a counselor from Metro Portland. They have about 60 million passengers per year they manage, I think 40 on bus and about 20 on rail, and I believe they're going to be adding some new rolling stock. Then we have Bridget Anderson, who's the CEO of the Greater Vancouver Board of Trade, who's long been an advocate for transportation systems and infrastructure. In Vancouver, you may not be aware, but there's a similar group called TransLink. They have 2 major projects underway as well. And then we have Dow Constantine, who's the CEO of Sound Transit, who has 30 million passengers a year to deal with on Link, Sounder, and the ST Express. And they've got, I believe, the largest expansion portfolio in all of America coming forward. So we'll have some interesting things. So Ashton, you please go first and maybe some opening remarks.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. How y'all doing? Good. Listen, I'm from Texas. We talk back. All right? Good. My name is Ashton Simpson. I'm a Metro counselor, retired veteran, father, husband, Portland State alum, and longtime advocate for transportation justice and community-led development. Our metro, Oregon Metro, is the nation's only regionally elected government. So we stand up major projects and programs over 24 cities across 3 counties. For those of you that don't know the Portland area, Metro's boundaries go from Hillsborough to Troutdale, from the Columbia River down to Wilsonville, and the 1.7 people within it. I live in and represent East Multnomah County. Much of its growth has come as communities of color and low-income folks were displaced from more central neighborhoods within Portland. Even as Portland and its western suburbs boom, East Portland, and specifically East Multnomah County, has been left behind in walkable infrastructure, transit investments, housing, and economic opportunities, and those inequities continue to play out today. I'm proud to be a voice for our communities on the Metro Council, on the Joint Policy Advisory Committee on Transportation, and as a member of the Executive Committee member on the Cascadia High-Speed Rail Project. All right, so y'all know there's a lot of headwinds right now. In addition to economic uncertainty, the federal government, and budget challenges, we in Oregon are also facing massive cuts at ODOT after the state legislature failed to pass a transportation package. Update, about an hour ago, our governor said that special session for the transportation package will happen or start August 29th. So we're getting right back to work. I would love to be here with a different message, that our state has allocated hundreds of millions of dollars to seeing this project move forward, but that isn't my job right now. Those of us in Oregon leadership who see the incredible value in high-speed rail need to take this opportunity while there is momentum in Washington State to build a public awareness and excitement and demand. And I'd be remiss if I didn't call out one of the state's staunchest advocates, Senator Chris Gorsuch, also an East Multnomah County representative here in the room today. He has been stomping on the high-speed rail and rail in general for a long time. So thank you, Senator Gorsuch. We need our business owners, our community at large, to understand that this could absolutely transform our economy and our workforce. This project has the power to transform infrastructure across our region and continent, from BC to Portland. We share an economy, a freight corridor, and a growing workforce already moving up and down I-5 daily, and that demand is increasing. So I did a little Google search. Today, July 22nd, 2025, I counted 44 direct commercial flights between PDX and SeaTac, 22 each way. At times, these flights were 15 minutes apart. Most of those passengers are on 76 passenger Embraer 175s, plus 4 737s and 2 Airbuses, 2020s. So if I do my math, I'm an old Air Force guy. I'm doing my math, that's 3,700 seats roughly, right? So I want to be clear, this research, again, happened via Google. It wasn't peer reviewed. It isn't an official source. It came straight from Google Flights. But I just wanted to highlight how often people are moving back and forth within our mega region on flights. I actually took the train up today, Cascadia Amtrak. It was my first go. It was my first time. And I'll tell you what, I'd rather that than sit in the car for 3 hours. It allowed me time to prepare to come and sit down and talk with you all, get my mind right, but also I got a chance to sit down and talk to somebody I never thought I'd ever sit down and get a chance to talk to. And those are the things, for me, growing up, helped to shape transportation and how we should do these things. And so high-speed rail doesn't replace but will strengthen and connect existing systems like the Amtrak Cascades, intercity and commuter rail, light rail, and bus rapid transit. Together, these systems will connect communities to jobs and education, link towns to small major markets, open up new opportunities across the region, all while easing pressure on I-5, improving freight reliability, and reducing emissions. Beyond transportation, however, high-speed rail can drive smart, equitable growth by stimulating affordable, transit-oriented development aligned with Metro's vision for growth and Cascadia's climate goals. We face a housing affordability crisis rooted in decades of underbuilding. If Oregon captures even part of what the UK saw, a 50% increase in development near high-speed rail stations, that could be transformative for our communities. Again, I'm not going to belabor it, but who wants to pass up on 200,000 jobs for folks and $355 billion worth of economic vitality? I know down in Texas, that's big money. I don't know how y'all feel about it up here, but we wouldn't pass up on that down there. There's also an opportunity for a more inclusive and accessible regional talent pool. Imagine what it would mean if a commute between our cities only took an hour and a half. And I'd be remiss, and I want to acknowledge a difficult legacy, the original I-5 construction that devastated the Black communities in Portland, displacing families, erasing wealth, and dividing neighborhoods. This project is an opportunity to plan differently, to center those communities, amplify ignored voices, and advance restorative justice. Again, we're talking about intergenerational projects. I-5 is an intergenerational project. It's still being used today and has been utilized by multiple generations to date. So process matters. It's not just where the train goes, it's how we get there, who's included, who shapes the plan, and who benefits. That's why Metro is committed to collaborative, community-rooted planning processes that build wealth, access, and belonging for our historically underserved communities. Thank you all again for having me. These conversations matter. The coalitions we build today are how we will create the infrastructure for the future, for a cleaner, more connected, and truly just future. Thank you.
Bridget?
Thanks very much, David. Bridget Anderson. I'm the CEO and the president of the Greater Vancouver Board of Trade, which represents over 5,000 members in the Greater Vancouver region. I also recently was appointed to the Cascadia Innovation Corridor Executive Committee and thrilled to be doing that under the leadership of former Governor Christine Gregoire. And I think back to the first time I met her. It was about 20 years ago, and I worked for former Premier Gordon Campbell in BC. And the two of them and the vision that they had for the region, I can see it shaping now, a couple of decades later. And so when I think about the opportunity for high-speed rail for the region, you know, it probably will be another 20 years, and we're standing here and still talking about how it is shaping the region. I wanted to talk a little bit about opportunities and consideration and coalitions. I think that the previous speakers have really been able to outline greatly what the opportunities are for this region. The Cascadia Innovation Corridor has 17 million people, an output of $600 billion in economic output, which is about the same as Switzerland. It is one of very few mega regions in the world. And a lot of the discussion over the last several days has talked about what the future is going to look like and how this region is going to play an enormous part as we move more and more and accelerate the adoption of AI. And the kind of talent that we have and the companies that we have in this region, it is clear that I think somebody yesterday talked about the shift from the east around manufacturing to the west and around technology and innovation. And then you think about high-speed rail and how can that connect the region. I think it would be incredibly important. It is also an opportunity not only for business travel, but also for tourism. And I didn't do the kind of math that you did, Ashton, but 57 million visitors, Seattle, Portland, and Vancouver, each city about $4.7 billion in tourism dollars. And so you think about if we could move people faster, that opportunity that it would provide. But if I switch gears and I think about some, I don't want to call them challenges, I'm going to call them considerations. The timing right now is, I think, is unique, as we have been speaking about the significant trade challenges that we have. And that is a big stumbling block. In Canada, we have a new Prime Minister, new federal government, and they are focused on projects of national priority in Canada. And so how do you then bring a project like this to the agenda? In addition, the fiscal constraints that we have, the federal government is facing much larger than a $40 billion deficit. In British Columbia, facing larger than a $10 billion deficit. And so the fiscal restraints are quite significant in Canada as they are in the United States. I think also about, you know, the kind of process that needs to happen, whether it's land acquisition. Neither, you know, Washington, even Oregon and British Columbia, not a lot of extra land between the mountains and the water. Another consideration for Canada when it comes to land acquisition is the need to have partnerships with Indigenous communities and the First Nations that may have some claims on that land. And I think that is something that makes it quite unique to doing business in Canada, and particularly in British Columbia, where there are not very many nations that have treaties in place. And so it becomes much more complex. Permitting is always complex, but when you start adding in the duty to consult with First Nations, that makes it another layer that certainly would add time and consideration. So partnerships need to be considered with those First Nations. A coalition, I think, is exactly what is going to be needed, and it needs to come from the business community to show the need for this. And one of the best ways that we can do that is standing right in front of us in May 2026 when we have FIFA. It is the opportunity to move people in a region and to show that there is a great need for better movement of people in the region. And so how can we help paint that picture? I was just attended the last session on FIFA, and I'm involved in a lot of the discussions in steering committees in FIFA, but I still feel like the train, pardon the pun here, but the train is coming down the tracks, and I'm not sure that we're all really ready for it, for the economic development opportunities and just the tourism opportunities that are going to come. It is very different. I worked for Premier Campbell during the 2010 Games, and the Olympics and FIFA are very, very different. But if we can find a way to leverage FIFA to start painting a picture for those decision makers, those policy makers, about why high-speed rail is needed, I think that would go a long way to really help build the business case around this. I think that maybe I'll leave my comments there because I know that we don't have a ton of time, but I can talk more a little bit when we get into the Q&A. Yeah.
Thank you, Brigitte. Dow?
Well, thanks so much. I am thrilled to be able to be here today. I know it's a sleepy, windowless room here in the late afternoon, so we'll try to talk fast and loudly, and hopefully all of us will hang in there to get through to happy hour. You know, I see Representative Jake Fye here. He's the chair of our Transportation Committee in the House of Representatives. It was a solid 3 decades ago that I was on the House Transportation Committee, and Representative Ruth Fisher, the Democratic leader, organized a trip during the interim and took us on the train to Portland to see TriMet and see the construction that was going on there, and encourage us to start thinking about maybe wanting to have a light rail system of our own. And here I am now in charge of that system, along with our commuter rail and our bus system. It comes full circle. Thank you, Representative, for your service, and your service to Sound Transit as well. It is a thrill to be here with my colleagues from Portland and Vancouver, and it is a heady time for transit, really. We are building regional light rail and in places around the country, intercity rail. We are contemplating the future of freight. Our own system in Central Puget Sound is growing very rapidly, remarkably rapidly, although everyone thinks that it's taking forever. The fact is, we went from nothing to next year over 60 miles of light rail across 3 counties just in the course of a decade and a half. It is difficult to keep up with, and yet in just a few months we will open our Federal Way link connecting all the way to the Pierce County border. And in a few months after that, we will open the first light rail across a floating bridge anywhere in the world to connect Seattle and the growing East Side via Eastlink. It's an exciting moment. And the technology is evolving at a breakneck pace. Of course, there's so much that we can adopt and adapt, and I'm thinking about the positive things that might be soon possible. I've been focusing on, as was shown in an earlier presentation, on technology-enhanced inspection and maintenance, safety enhancement, adopting CBTC, communication-based train control, to help us be able to manage the asset that is our rail system better, to have more people and more train sets be able to use that system and maintain better headways. All of this is being made possible by newer innovations in technology applied to the rail system. The monitoring and the modeling tools, I heard that, Bruce, the monitoring and the modeling tools that are now available are going to help us better manage our assets and keep those assets in a state of good repair. And from my perch at Sound Transit, I get to think about high-speed rail as well, and think about the way in which the systems that we are operating can nest with that high-speed rail and with the intercity rail provided by Amtrak and with all of the other elements of our transportation system. We have great urban rail systems with TriMet and with TransLink and with Sound Transit, and being able to connect those so people can travel across long distances, and then when they arrive, not be standing there waiting, hoping for an Uber, but be able to get on a transit system that will then take them to hundreds of destinations that they want to get to, and then in reverse get them back home again, is really the vision, right? That's what we want for our Cascadia region, to be able to work and live and play across British Columbia, Washington State, and Oregon, across 3 major metropolitan regions seamlessly. And I often end up explaining to folks, as we're building out these different modes, the way in which people are going to be able to use these systems overlapping with one another to put together a seamless ride from where they are to where they need to be and back. Today, it's still not possible, really, to conduct business across that vast Cascadia corridor without a lot of transportation challenges. But we're working towards it. And I personally think that high-speed rail is an important element of that solution. When we designed Sound Transit 3, at the time, a $54 billion expansion, knitting together our 3-county Central Puget Sound region with light rail and other transit, we designed that with the arrival of high-speed rail in mind, so that you could get to downtown Seattle and then go from there, or even downtown Everett or downtown Tacoma. And Representative Fye, the board voted at our last board meeting to move forward with Pierce County onward to Tacoma as soon as we get open to Federal Way. So I'm thrilled to be able to be a part of this conversation. I am thrilled that our region is, and by that I mean our mega region, is helping to lead the world in finding more sustainable ways for us to grow, live, and prosper. And with that, I look forward to your questions. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Dow. Maybe we'll just go to questions from the audience right now. Again, if you have a question, put up your hand. We'll bring you a microphone. If not, maybe I'll start out with one question. So I'm head of a BC Business Coalition for Cascadia High-Speed Rail. One of the challenges we have about 80 members, and you'd be familiar with this, is as we ask people to support the various chambers, the various business groups, they say, yes, we support high-speed rail, but we want to get this bus line, we want to get this LRT extension, we want to get something else done. And we all know if you have that kind of thinking, at some point, you're not going to get there. But that's, I guess, a vision and a leadership question. So maybe you can talk a little bit more about how we can integrate the vision for the mega region so it's seen as kind of a win-win. I know Rob's not here now. Rob's here. He's working with that just because you're putting money in this bucket doesn't mean you're losing the dollar in the other bucket. So maybe talk a little bit more about how we can have a long-term mega region strategy and still service somebody on a street corner that wants to get service. So, Ashton, you want to go first?
So one, that's a good question. As I think about that question, when you have folks who have the buy-in, right, like they can see themselves, like great example, FIFA World Cup, a lot of business can see how the benefit there, right? And I think that it goes beyond just saying high-speed rail, right? You have to say, well, to your point, how do we pinwheel this thing to other opportunities, housing, more transit connectivity, more opportunities for access to economic opportunity. Particularly, again, I represent communities that are underserved or don't have access to the socioeconomic processes. And so, like, this project, and I want to leave some space for the rest of the panelists, you have to make sure folks can see, not only see themselves embedded with the project, but like, also, like, what's the plan of events? So if we're a mega region and we're hosting events, either Portland, Vancouver, Seattle, how are we working together to say, well, we know you're hosting FIFA World Cup. We got flights coming into Portland, whoop-de-whoop-de-whoop. How do we get there, right? Anyway, I start talking to you like we back in the office. Anyway, but that's, I think we need a coordinated strategy around like, events, planning, housing, all of those things.
This may not be a popular thought, and it is the elephant in the room, but the challenge for Canada and for BC is the Trump administration right now and the policies that are impacting Canada. And so that becomes a big stumbling block for Canada, as well as the fiscal contribution. I mean, the federal government of the United States has put in $50 million, Washington $5.6 million, and the British Columbia government has put in less than $1 million into studying this. So it is about getting the BC government, the Canadian government, on board, but it is going to be very tough to do that in the next few years because, there was some comments yesterday about why Canada was feeling so hurt, and that hurt is going to take some time to heal, and it's not just hurt, it is trust that has to be rebuilt. So at the same time, Canada and each of the provinces, and the provinces are meeting with the Prime Minister today, talking about their projects of national priority. So each province is thinking about the projects that they need to do to build Canadian unity, to build the economy in Canada. So I worry that, as we're trying to put this forward and move this forward, that there is a whole other narrative going on in Canada that this is just trying to align this at a very tricky time politically.
Thank you. Well, first off, we're with you, sister. So I'm headed north next week to help continue building Canada's economy. I will say that the key to moving this forward, one of the keys to moving this forward, is not technological. It's not planning or engineering. It is about building a political coalition. And I cannot say that it's on this scale, because nothing we've done is on this scale. It's one of the biggest, most complex things any of us will ever do in our lifetimes. But when we put together the Sound Transit 3 program that I talked about, probably the single biggest thing that we accomplished to make that happen was getting the governments aligned with the business community and the labor community, with the tribes and with advocates and academics to create this seamless coalition that all shared a vision of moving this thing forward. And that's how we got it across the finish line, even though it's bigger than anything we've ever done and probably bigger than anything that's happening almost anywhere in the United States. And we're going to have to do that to get this high-speed rail system built in the Cascadia corridor. I agree, this is going to take a lot of work beyond the end of the current federal administration for us to rebuild trust. I was meeting with the British Columbia Trade Minister, as were some of you, I bet, the day or the week that the first tariffs went into effect. It was an unhappy week to be in British Columbia. But we are here in this region very strong advocates for and supporters of British Columbia and Vancouver, and a lot of us identify very closely with our relationships across the northern border. And I trust that we will, in time, be able to overcome this and build the coalition that will get this important transportation link built.
Great, thank you. Maybe you might put another perspective before another question, and I hope Hannah won't get too worried back back from Microsoft. So Microsoft and Amazon have big supporters of the Cascadia Innovation Corridor. That's the business logo that we had up here, amongst other companies. And there's a bit of a maybe it's an urban legend in this room, or Hannah might get worried. So Satya Nadella, who is the CEO of Microsoft, when he first was coming over here after Bill Gates was moving forward in Bulmer, he lived in Canada for a while, and then he was commuting on a regular basis between Seattle and Vancouver. And he was asking a lot of people, he said, why don't you guys get together and do a bit more? So I think there's part of the challenge is we don't have maybe the same vision of our region as well as maybe some of the world leaders. I know you travel a lot, all of you, from a global perspective. So I think people who are from outside our region probably sometimes see our potential more than we do ourselves. So got a question here, so go ahead.
Just a quick question about governance. And I'm just wondering, thank you, because I haven't heard very much about the structure of governance for a system like this, and it will be very complex. But can something like the Portland area's metro be at least a beginning point to think about how something could be managed, or is that just not the same thing at all?
I give my opinion, and that's all it is. I think this is going to require the direct involvement of our national governments. The multiple jurisdictions, the multinational complications are far too much for a local entity to handle, let alone one that's populated by self-started activists who get up and run to be on this transportation board. And I do think that there is important space for local representation up and down the line, because remember, although these are serving major metropolitan centers, most of the track is going through rural and exurban areas where people are not going to perceive a lot of benefit for themselves. So we're going to have voices, local voices up and down the line to make sure that things are done in a way that is equitable and fair to all the communities we're impacting. But I don't think we can do it without the power of our national governments behind it.
Ashton, you grabbed the mic there, yeah.
Oh, I agree. But I wouldn't hold back on the power of our local governments, particularly in Portland. That is our engine for our state, literally. So like our voices carry, because without Portland, without that part of the region, our state has no other economic engine. And so we have to lead that conversation for our state. And I get the national piece. We don't have, I mean, where is our national representation right now? Right, so we have to depend on our local voices.
Well, certainly a federal project, and I think, as we all know, we all want to have an international airport, but we want to have about a half an hour away with not very much traffic between your house and there. So go ahead.
Let's just talk about our national government for a minute. This will be the second time I invoke 9/11 in this room today. But after 9/11, the entire U.S. airspace was shut down. And when the government came and said, we need to get the planes up, what was the first plane service they put up? The shuttle between New York and Washington, the only lane in which there was actually anything close to both a high-speed rail service and the intermodality that you talk about with commuter, bus, public transit. So how do we overcome that? You know, we all say, oh, I was in Europe, why can't we do that? But this idea that everybody loves the idea and the romance of the trains, but when push comes to shove, it's, as the box top said, get me a ticket on an airplane. Ain't got time for a fast train.
What's your name? How many drinks can you take before we get to that answer? Because, right. Well, I'll give you my opinion, right? Because I grew up in a community down in Houston where we were underserved. Again, I get to do the job of representing the community that I kind of grew up in, right? And I think about like, well, now that I'm in behind the curtain where the sausage is made, and I get to see how policy decisions are made, and a lot of things could have been done a long time ago, but part of it was political will, right? Nobody read the room, engagement. Didn't have the right. I'm the second black counselor to serve at Metro, and there was a 25-year gap between the two of us. So for two and a half decades, there was nobody that looked like me that sat at the table to direct our region. And so if we want to do these big projects, we have to like first build a coalition of political leadership. That means you got to vote better. If your leadership locally or statewide or whatever doesn't meet it, get them out of there and get the folks that you need in there to push these things forward, because our citizens deserve excellent government, but when our leaders don't strive for excellence for our constituents, they get the bare minimum status quo BS that we have always seen. So I urge you to keep challenging us, keep pushing on us, vote us out. If we don't do it, kick us out. I can only say that because I'm retired. I don't care if you kick me out. I'm gonna be fine. I just want to work and change things, and I hope that the people that represent you want to do the same.
Thanks, Ashton. Have we missed anything? Any questions? Amy, you're at the back. She's a bit of a guru in transport. Have we missed everything? Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We didn't get into housing. That was one other area. There's been some talk about trying to solve housing with systems, but we'll probably leave that. But I want to give one more appreciation for our panel and thank them for their time and their comments. And Bruce, you can wrap us up.
Well, that was a great session and a great day. I will note, and Amy, correct me if I'm wrong on this, I believe that the Cascadia Innovation Corridor is meeting in October. October 29th, and high-speed rail will be a hot topic. So, special session at the end, and that also in October, earlier, we will take our road show on our supply chains and high-performance rail to Portland. So Ashton, we're actually, your mayor is going to be talking about high-speed rail down there, but we're going to focus on kind of saving the Portland Union Station. It needs a lot of work. It's a historic building. We hope to have it as a center not only of the Cascades and the Coast Starlight, but hopefully the future and the Empire Builder, but also the old Pioneer that would connect Portland down to Salt Lake through Boise. So that Union Station is part of a Broadway corridor redevelopment program. We're working with ODOT and Amtrak and the city, the Prosper Portland group, and the congressional delegation. Hopefully we can get some funding and do some transit-oriented development around that Union Station, because it's very, very critical to the system and it needs some help. So, so that's it, and we're on time. And I think, again, tomorrow, continuing our track, we're going to focus on how to get in critical supplies to Alaska from Northwest Seaports, and also talking about the Canadian connection into Alaska Tidewater ports. And then we have a very interesting session on the future of aviation in terms of sustainable aviation fuel and the important role that regional airports play throughout the Pinwheel region. And then a discussion about electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. So full body discussion for 2 days. So David, always a pleasure to working with you, and we look forward to getting up to Vancouver pretty soon. Thank you.